Hello and welcome to Buzzer Beaters Season 5, Episode 6. Today we have the great Maggie Davis joining the show, and as always, I'm your host, Sam Block. Maggie's joining here, and hopefully we don't have technical difficulties, and we'll get it going, and we'll have a great show. She has a ton of experience in the sports industry, and she's going to come on the camera right now. Here we go. Let's bring it. Hopefully the sound is good this time around, and we'll have a great show. Hey, Maggie Davis, how you doing?
Hello, Sam. How are you?
Good. How does the sound to you now?
It's perfect. Thank you for dealing with me.
Oh, no, listen, it is not your fault. I think the trick is these long headphones, the old-fashioned kind.
Yes.
And the AirPods are not necessarily built for this, but we're going to get this show going. Listen, Maggie, welcome into Buzzer Beaters. I'm thrilled to have you. I was telling the fans before that we met at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut last summer. We both had an internship. You were in Los Angeles. You came to Bristol, Connecticut for the weekend, but talk to us about a little bit what you do. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Great. Well, like you said, I'm Maggie, and we're going to get this show rolling finally. I was so glad to meet you this summer in ESPN. Like you said, I was in Los Angeles. I'm in production, so there's 3 of us out there as opposed to however many you all had out in Bristol. And we worked either on The Jump with Rachel Nichols doing NBA stuff, or we worked on SportsCenter at night, which is the late night edition of SportsCenter. So my hours were really crazy, but I loved it. Right now I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm from here in Lexington. I go to school here in Lexington, or I did, I guess I should say. I graduated from UK this year with a degree in broadcast journalism, political science, and digital media and design, and all that fun stuff. And right now I'm just kind of hanging tight and doing what I can to stay safe and busy and all that. I have a couple of jobs right now, but they're both sort of the part-time jobs I had in college. I'm working for Kentucky Sports Radio, which if you're not familiar with Kentucky, probably doesn't mean anything, but in Lexington, covering UK sports, especially basketball, is a big deal. And we have a radio show and a website and a sports bar and a TV show and all that kind of stuff. So I work for them as a staff writer and the Sunday editor and our digital contributor, doing all the social media and stuff like that. And then I'm also a sports reporter on TV here for the show Hey Kentucky on our local station, LEX 18, and really just having a lot of fun, staying busy.
Hey, very nice. Listen, I love that long, amazing resume. You have so much to offer, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Another thing is great female in the industry, and there's not enough, females in the industry. We all know that. We all know there's so many talented females out there. So I want your voice to be heard. So I wanted to bring you on the show and let you talk some sports with me. Before we get to sports, though, it's been a really tough couple months for everyone around the world. Everyone tuning in. You're from Kentucky, I'm from New Jersey, but we're all, going through similar stuff. So is your family doing all right? How are you and your friends doing over there?
We are. Thank you for asking. We're great. So after college kind of got shut down, I guess you could say, I moved back home. It wasn't too big of a deal at first because we didn't know how long this was going to, be going on for. And like I said, I went to UK and I'm from Lexington, so just about 20 minutes down the road. I'm living back at home with my parents and my younger sister, who is going into college this year. She's an incoming freshman. So we're all just hanging out at home and making the best of a really weird and once-in-a-lifetime situation. But we're all staying healthy, and that's the important part. So that's all good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this virus has affected everyone around the world, but definitely has affected us in the sports world. And I know that you said you've still been staying involved, doing some sports-related jobs, and your career is, a little bit on pause right now, like me and like a lot of people, but you've still been doing some stuff. So even though sports are on hold, what kind of things have you been doing in your positions the last couple months?
Well, the last couple months have basically been me scouring the internet and local stations and trying to find local stories and finding sports stories even when there are no live sports. And at first it was really, really daunting, honestly, but I feel like I've sort of gotten used to it at this point, and it also has taught me a lot about how to be a good journalist and how to find those good local stories. And it's something that gets easier with time, I guess. I think it's going to be almost overwhelming when sports actually do come back. And we're like, wait, we have 3 games and practices and press conferences. And where right now it's like, okay, it's a Wednesday night. I need to find something to write about. And we just sort of go from there. But luckily it hasn't been too hard. And we've got a great team in all the projects I work on. So we're doing all right.
That's awesome. Listen, I think all of us really hope that it's crazy when everything comes back and there's 17 sports to try to cover at once because it's been so down for the last couple months. All right, but let's take it back a little bit, back to when you were growing up, when you were a younger kid. when did you first know you wanted to work in the sports industry one day and really be involved in sports day in and day out?
Well, before I knew I wanted to be involved in like sports necessarily, I just knew that I wanted to do writing. I loved writing from the time I was in elementary school. Like that's all I wanted to do. I loved the English classes I took. I loved reading and writing and writing papers. I was always that kid who was like, yes, a paper, not a test. I love a paper. And everyone's like, that's so weird. But to me, I just grew up loving writing. And so for a long time, I knew that I wanted to do something with that. But I didn't really know exactly what. And then living in Lexington, Kentucky, obviously sports are kind of injected into your veins, especially basketball, college basketball. And so I would always go to UK games with my mom and got really invested in sports from a young age from that standpoint. And then, sort of on the other side, I actually lived in Ohio for a little bit. I don't know if you know that, but I'm a little bit of an Ohio State fan. And I lived in Cleveland and Dayton for a couple of years when I was younger. So then I got into the Cincinnati Reds and sort of fell in love with the game that way as well. So it really was a process for me to figure out how exactly I wanted to put all that together. I didn't know, I guess like in high school, I sort of realized, I guess, that you could be a sports writer. I was like, oh, I love sports and I love writing, but I don't know what to do with that. And then eventually I sort of pieced those puzzle pieces together, I guess. But then I, made the decision to go into college as a biology major. I was pre-med all freshman year and was like, oh, writing is just a hobby and all that sort of stuff. It took me a while to figure it all out, but I got this internship with Kentucky Sports Radio. I started covering women's basketball, fell in love with it and realized like, okay, this isn't just a hobby. This is what I'm really passionate about. This is what I want to be my whole career. And I'm really excited for it.
That's awesome. Listen, I think one thing that the fans can all see right now is that your passion is evident and clear, and it's shining through. So, no, thank you for that. And shout out to Caroline Finesmith tuning in, Erin Goldstein, and Justin Trotter from Hazlitt, New Jersey. So nice. A lot of viewers tuning in for Maggie and me today. All right, talk about some of the role models in your life, some of the people that have really been a big influence on you, whether you were a young kid or maybe to this day.
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one. I would say just in general, like kind of what everyone normally says, like my parents and just my family for being so supportive. Like making the decision to switch from biology to journalism is a really drastic decision, not only in the short term, but for parents to be like, oh, like she wants to do this like as a career for her whole life. And so to be supported through that decision meant a whole lot to me. And it still does, even to this day. I mean, I just graduated from college with a degree and don't have a job. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic and I'm still trying to get hired as a sports reporter when there are no live sports. And, somehow I'm still getting that support from them. So just above all else, I would say family. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's big time. And I definitely think they're going to keep helping you through the years. So you talked a little bit about Kentucky earlier. I know that's where you're from originally and where you're living right now. Kentucky's a big-time school, big-time basketball program, definitely a lot of great things going on there for the Big Blue. So talk to us about what made you choose Kentucky in the first place. Why did you want to go there? I know it's close to home, but anything that stood out to you when you were trying to choose where to go to college?
Yeah, the fact that it's close to home at first was why I wasn't going to go to UK. I mean, when I was a freshman, sophomore in high school, I was like, oh my gosh, I would never stay in Lexington. I'm going far away. And junior year spring break, again, going back to my family support, we went on a big spring break trip all up and down, sort of like the East Coast, hit UVA, North Carolina, all the way down to Florida, down in Gainesville. And I looked at a ton of schools. I loved Auburn. I looked there for a long time. And I guess the further along in this, crazy college decision process I got, the more I realized, like, I have a great school, like, right down the street from me. I don't know why I've been ignoring it for so long. I obviously was so passionate about Kentucky, like, from a sports perspective my whole life, but I don't think it really clicked that I wanted to go to school there until I took time to actually take a campus tour. Like, it sounds weird, like, since I live in Lexington, but I hadn't spent that much time actually on campus. I hadn't gone around and looked at the library and the classrooms and the gym and all that stuff. So once I did that, I think that was probably like the big decision maker for me when I was like, okay, this is a great school. I've got a good deal going here and this is what I want to do. So, and now it's go Big Blue all the way.
Right. Listen, I think it's really great that you evaluated your options and then maybe thought deep down, wait, this is a really good option for me right down the road. And I think that's really just an awesome story, so thank you for sharing it.
Thanks. How did you get from New Jersey to Ohio State? Not to interrupt, but how did you get down there?
Hey, listen, so I've actually been a huge Buckeye fan since I was growing up at a very young age. I watched the 2002 national championship against Miami, and I was a Buckeye just my whole life. And then again, like you, even though, it wasn't close, but Ohio State was my number one choice. and I still looked around. I looked at different schools like Penn State. That may shock some people, but
Ah!
yeah, some big time schools like around me, sports related schools, definitely, with good journalism or communication or broadcasting type programs. And then I just realized that Ohio State was the place for me. A lot of spirit, a lot of energy, and that's
Yes.
definitely what I like most. But all
Perfect.
right, let's talk about when we first met. ESPN. That's what brought us together. That's how we know each other. Really,
Represent. I got it
worldwide.
back
Great
here.
connections.
I got it right there.
Absolutely, I've been seeing that, and I love that back there. Listen, what made you, you know, decide I want to be at ESPN? You applied for the internship. You got the internship, and what was your experience like all summer in living in Los Angeles? Really?
It was the most incredible experience I've ever had in my entire life. Like I can't say it enough. It's one thing like, oh, you get to live in Los Angeles. I was 22 years old living in Los Angeles for the summer. Like that's incredible.
Right.
But more importantly, I was working for a company that I wanted to work for as long as I can remember. I think even when I was little and just thought, oh, I want to do something with writing, there was always that part of me that was like, maybe I'll write for ESPN, before I even like realized exactly what I wanted to do down the road. And so was almost like oh, this is just a pipe dream of mine that I've always wanted to do. Like it's something I've been thinking about and working for a long time. But I'd also heard, rumors about how many people apply and like that huge like drop from like 100,000 or whatever applications down to however many interns get selected. So it was one of those things that I worked really hard for, and I spent a lot of time on my application and I felt good about it, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm for sure going to get this. So when I did, that was like the craziest moment ever. I was on spring break, actually. Just me and my mom were down at my grandma's place in Florida. And I got a phone call to do a couple more interviews, did those, and then got the call later that week with the offer and accepted it. And, it only got better from there. And then moving out to Los Angeles, I lived with the other, one of the other interns out there, Ashley Washburn. Shout out to her.
Shout out to Ashley Washburn.
Shout out to Ashley Washburn. We love her. So the two of us lived together with a couple other girls in an apartment, and we got really close along with the other interns that were out there, and it was great. We had a great time. I learned a lot. I learned a lot more from so many people, just from the top to the bottom, like producers, stage managers, talent, everyone. It is so much like nicer and like cooler than I even like anticipated. And I knew they would be nice and cool, but everyone was just like truly so helpful throughout the entire experience. And I hope you felt the same way.
Oh, definitely. And Ashley Washburn's tuning in, so definitely want to shout her out another time. Big fan
Ashley.
of hers. Big fan of hers. And I really like something that you said. Again, you mentioned writing. Again, I've heard you mention writing a couple times now throughout this show. So I kind of want to pinpoint that. So a lot of times people don't realize how much being on camera and working in sports, even if it's not writing specific, really writing is what helps build a foundation and really help you, do a lot of things better, even if it's not writing. So talk to us about what that really has done for you and what being a good writer and what loving writing has helped you through the years, even when you weren't necessarily writing an essay.
Definitely. I mean, I would not be in the position that I am in right now if it wasn't for my love of writing and for my experience at getting better at writing. It's one of those things where so many people just think that people on TV are just like talking or something like that, but everything has to get planned out. And for me, I've always been really drawn to like the storytelling aspect of journalism. That's what I love doing the most. I love, finding sort of obscure stories and helping athletes or fans or coaches, et cetera, tell those stories. And to me, that really goes hand in hand with writing. And it's just something that people overlook too often, I think. And I mean, I only got to cover UK basketball games because I was covering them for a sports writing blog. And I only got that experience because I had spent the year before covering the UK football team. And I only got that experience because I was covering the UK women's basketball team. And it's just one of those things where you just have to sort of build on your experiences and get better. And to me, writing is, like you said, such a foundation to everything that we want to do. And whether that's behind the scenes producing or on the field doing sideline, coming up with how you're going to phrase a certain sentence, like that's perfect. Like you have to know how to build a good story. And to me, that all comes down to writing.
Oh, you're so right. And even really like famous sports anchors or sports center hosts or, local news sports anchors, what people don't realize is a lot of times they may be writing their own scripts. They may be writing the.
I was so surprised by that. Right. Yes, I was so surprised by that in LA.
Right. He's one of the best speakers on television that there is, and people don't understand. He's writing all day long, making the perfect story, really helping himself out when he's on camera. It's a lot easier when you have a great story already on paper, on the computer.
Yes.
So let's hear a little bit about your time at Kentucky. You talked about growing up, you were a fan of Kentucky. So it must have been a little surreal being with John Calipari and some of those great basketball players going through the school. You talked about football and maybe some other sports as well that aren't as popular to just the average fan. So what was it like covering Kentucky sports and really being in the building and having your face be seen?
Oh my gosh, I could not like hardly put it into words. I mean, at first it was one of those things where it was like, okay, Maggie, like be cool. Like you're here to work. You're here to work. And I think I did a good job of that. And now it's, one of those things where I've been on the floor of Rupp Arena so many times that you kind of forget how cool it is. And then when it was the last one of the season every year, I'm like, oh man, like I'm really going to miss being in here. Like it really is so cool. And whether that's on the football field at Kroger Field or the basketball arena for the women's team or the men's team, like all around it really has been a surreal experience. But like you said, like UK athletics top to bottom is really, really strong in the SEC. And I mean, I've done several stories with the volleyball team that were nationally ranked all year and have a couple of All-Americans that were great. I did a story with the rifle team that I knew nothing about beforehand, but they were number one in the country and they taught me how to shoot a rifle, and that was crazy and cool. And, just top to bottom, I think our athletic director, Mitch Barnhart, has done a really good job of building up all of our teams. Obviously, the one people that follow the most is the basketball team, especially unless you're here. I mean, I think it's a little surprising to a lot of people how big Kentucky football is. It sort of gets overlooked because of how much, people here are crazy about basketball. But really top to bottom, like the entire athletic department is doing a really nice job right now.
Very nice. So I want to talk to you about, we were talking about some big time, sports at your school and rifle and volleyball. And I think that's really interesting. But let's zone in on basketball right now, basketball specific, even though this rivalry may take place in other sports. Ohio State has a big hatred of Michigan. And I know Kentucky is right up there with a big hatred for Louisville.
Yes.
So do you share that hatred? Have you kind of grown to respect them a little bit over the years? What's that rivalry like down there?
All right, I'll let you in on a secret. Don't tell anyone.
All right.
Don't tell. You promise?
Other than the people watching.
My dad is a U of L fan. So we live in a divided household. My mom grew up as a Kentucky fan. My dad is from Louisville. He went to U of L. He is born and raised red. My mom was born and raised blue. It's just one of those things I've been around my whole life. I was born in Louisville before we moved to Ohio and then back ultimately to Lexington. So, I mean, for me growing up, it obviously was like I was on my mom's side. I was, team Big Blue all the way. Now that I'm covering it, I'm a little more even peeled there, I guess. And try not to be biased. Yes, I try my best. But it was obviously different also before when Rick Pitino was still the coach, because to people in Kentucky, he was such a polarizing figure. I mean, he coached the Cats for over a decade, brought home national titles, left, and then a couple years later was back coaching the team's rival. I mean, that's just something that is unforgivable to Kentucky basketball fans. And then when all the controversy came out, they had hookers in the dorm rooms and they were paying recruits, and it truly just became sort of like a joke. It was like, oh my gosh, Louisville is at it again. And now I think that their new athletic director, I mean, after they had to obviously clean house, their new athletic director has done a nice job of filling some of those positions with people that are going to shine Louisville in some different light, I guess. But, when you grow up a Kentucky fan, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to cheer for the Cards.
No, I totally understand that. I'm glad you pointed that out because Chris Mack has done a very good job at Louisville over the past couple of years. And I also think it's interesting. People from around the country, a lot of times, including myself, have said, like, Louisville. But really, if you're from Kentucky, let the crowd hear. What's the
If you're from Kentucky, you have to say it right. And I hope everyone watching this knows it's Louisville. I know that's not how it's spelled. I know it doesn't make sense, but it is. And it's always funny whenever I'm talking to people like that, and if Louisville comes up at all, they're like, you're from Kentucky, aren't you? Because I don't think I really have like a country accent or anything that people stereotype Kentuckians with, but I definitely say Louisville the right way.
Correct. And I think that definitely makes it shine that you are from Kentucky. All right. So you were talking about how you worked for Kentucky Sports Radio and you've done some work with Hey Kentucky on Lex 18. And I think for people that are watching the show, some people may not really know exactly what that is. And I think it would be cool if you shared a little bit. What are some of your favorite like projects that you've worked on or things that you've done while working for those two places?
Sure. Well, like I said earlier, KSR has like truly made me fall in love with journalism and sports broadcasting in general. That's what really made the decision an obvious one for me when I was trying to decide between biology and journalism. I was like, like I do okay in these biology classes, but I'm really happiest when I'm covering the basketball team for KSR.
Hmm.
And so those opportunities that they've given me over the past 4 years have been incredible. And we've been able to grow it so much. And I mean, it's hard to explain again, like if you're not from Kentucky, but I mean, the KSR website here is honestly, humble brag, like it gets more hits than like our local news or our local newspapers or any media in the state. And it's because people are so sports crazy here.
Hmm.
And so I've learned a lot doing that. And, you obviously if you make a mistake, people are going to call you out on it. And that's something that I've, grown a lot from because those commenters are ruthless all the time. But, they give you a lot of awesome opportunities. And we're a pretty small crew. There's, I'd say, like 10 of us who are like pretty involved on like a daily basis. And we don't all live here in Lexington, but we're all in touch like almost every day trying to figure out the best way to cover the Cats and be fun across all platforms, whether that's the radio show or the TV show or the website or the YouTube channel or the Facebook page or, whatever it may be, or a sports bar that is open now. And so it really is like a whole sort of like brand, I guess, which has been really, really fun to work for, just to be a part of such like a recognizable outlet, I guess. And then Hey Kentucky is totally different because it's a TV show that is like half news and politics and then half sports. And so I think the show does a really nice job of covering things that Kentuckians are really interested in without being like your typical like news show. It's
Hmm.
more discussion. It's kind of set up like PTI, where like
Okay.
we go down like a list of topics and you have a certain amount of time everywhere. And that's where I've sort of gotten most of my on-camera experience is doing sports stories for them, and whether that's local stories for like high school sports or local sports or just covering the Cats for them. I've
Hmm.
learned a lot with them as well. And like I said earlier, the rifle story was really cool because I had never shot a gun like that before, and I was like trying to
Right.
learn on camera, and it was crazy, but it was a good experience. They're
I
all
love,
great.
I absolutely love that. And you've had your work in ESPN, like we talked about. Linda Cohn's over there. Doris Burke,
Yes.
another great woman in the industry. Then you also have people like Laura Rutledge, Maria Taylor. I'm really curious, and Ashley Washburn called you a trailblazing woman in the industry before,
Thank you,
which I
Ashley.
think is accurate. I told you at the beginning of the show, we really need a bigger presence of females in this industry. And it's obviously a male driven industry right now, but I've seen a really positive trend where more females are becoming popular and people are realizing the talent and the sports love that these females have. So, talk to me about some of your favorite and some of your role models and some of the people you really look up to in the industry that are females on air, people everybody knows about.
Yeah, definitely. This is such a good question because there are so many women that I would like to shout out here. Obviously, like you said, they really have been a growing presence of that lately, and I've loved to see that. Of course, as a big SEC girl,
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love the work that Laura Rutledge does. I love just her sort of overall like demeanor, I guess, in terms of she's great at what we talked about earlier, and that's telling a story. She can do
Mm-hmm.
a great sideline report, but she also does a lot of sit down interviews or like fan experiences, and the way she hosts SEC Nation, that kind of stuff is really story driven and people oriented. And that's something that I would really like to do sort of in that, element as in terms of how she covers things. And, now she's on Get Up all the time. And I think she does an excellent job there. She's on
Absolutely.
podcasts all the time. And I've talked with her a couple of times and she's always so nice, which is always fun to learn. Like they always tell you, like, don't meet your idols or whatever. And then it's like you just hope that they're as nice as you hope that they are. And
Right,
and
right.
she really was. And she really was. And I also would say Rachel Nichols, just from working with her out in Los Angeles, she was incredible. She was so nice to me the whole time I was out there. She taught me a lot. We've emailed a couple of times since then. She's been seriously one of the nicest people ever. And like you talked about earlier with Scott Van Pelt, like people don't realize how much of that show she writes herself. And she is like the grinder of the NBA. Like she is out there all the time working and reporting and writing. And she does a great opening monologue that I personally really like because, again, it goes back to like my love for writing, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
I think she does an amazing job of using her ability to write a really great story because she worked in print for a long time as well.
Right.
And how she's able to translate that onto the jump. And yeah, I think like I said, there's a lot I could go on all day about it, but those are the two that like immediately come to mind, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think it's really cool that you mentioned Rachel Nichols because I agree with what you're saying. I had the chance to talk to her a little bit last week on the
I saw
Classroom
that. I
series.
saw that. That was
Very,
great.
very cool. It was a great experience. But she was talking about how she really has a major role with the jump, and she didn't want to
Yes.
just necessarily be the female on the set that was basically asking the males the questions.
Right.
Like, it's not she doesn't enjoy that as well, but she has a really strong voice. She has a lot to say. She knows what she's talking about. She has a ton of years in the industry. So we should hear what she has to say. And on the jump, like you said, she really has that presence, which I love.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move to people on air to athletes. So what is one athlete that you haven't had the chance to interview yet that one day would really just be someone that you'd love to have the chance to interview?
I'd have to say Anthony Davis. I know that's a little bit of UK bias, but I am a huge basketball person. I'm a huge NBA person, and to get to talk to the Brow, I thought I was going to get to this summer. I thought he was going to come out to ESPN Los Angeles for an interview when he got moved over to the Lakers, but it didn't end up working out. And so I was like, okay, one day I'm going to meet the Brow. And I've got this poster behind me. I don't know if you saw it, but they gave it out at one of the UK basketball games, and it's of all of like the former UK players who are in the NBA one day or currently in the NBA. And first of all, it's a crazy image to see like how many pros John Calipari has produced here in a decade. Like that is crazy.
Oh yeah.
So I sort of made this goal for myself that right now it's just sitting in my office and it's just framed and whatever. But eventually I'm going to have all those guys signing that when I'm covering the NBA one day. That's the plan.
I love it. Hey, that's amazing. So let's talk about something else that's going to happen in the future. Next 5 to 15 years. 5's a little bit early, but 15, you're going to have a great established career by then, I'm sure.
Thank you.
So what are some
you
things
too.
that you look? Thank you. I'm sure we'll be together doing some powerful work. But over the next 5 to 15 years, where do you see yourself? What do you see yourself doing? What are some of your goals? If you really had everything you wanted, 15 years from now, what are you going to be doing?
That is hard. Oh my gosh. Okay. Put me on the spot. I think in this industry, especially, like the difference between 5 and 15 years is huge. And there's never really I love asking people or researching about people that are on air now, like how they got to that spot, because there are truly so many different ways you can go about it. So, I guess the traditional path that I would love to take is like doing local news, local sports, like killing that for a couple of years and hopefully doing well there and moving on to a regional network, something like the SEC network or a Big Ten or an ACC or a Mountain West or whatever. I'm pretty flexible in terms of where I go or what I cover, whatever. I just want to be covering sports and telling stories and doing that however I can. I feel like in 15 years, hopefully I'm like kind of settled somewhere where I want to be. I would love to eventually be back with the worldwide leader, whether that's in Bristol or Los Angeles or even with the SEC network out in Charlotte. Something like that would be ideal for me. But I'm trying not to think too far ahead since we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I'm trying to get through it like one day at a time right now, I think.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. Listen, we don't have to talk 15 years right now. We can keep it to that 5-year mark, but definitely looking forward to you doing great things.
Let's
talk about another team that you mentioned earlier. Really gets a little bit overlooked because of how big time Kentucky hoops is, but Kentucky football. So a lot of people don't know much about Kentucky football, so I want your expertise here. What do you expect from them this season, if hopefully we do have a season? What kind of things are you looking for? Are you looking for a team that's going to have some success, going to struggle a little bit? What do you like with Kentucky football?
I feel pretty good about Kentucky football this year. And like we said, like it does get a little overlooked, and I understand that. It is sort of a basketball state. But what Kentucky football has done in the last 2 or 3 years has truly been incredible. And I hope more people get to start paying attention to it. Mark Stoops, when he came to Kentucky a couple of seasons ago, 6 years ago now, like had a couple of seasons that were 2-win seasons. And that was just sort of the culture here. And it got to the point where he's even now said, like, that's how the players viewed it. The players came in and were like, well, we're just Kentucky football. That's so Kentucky. The phrase was always, that's so Kentucky football. Oh, we lose to Florida. That's so Kentucky football. Oh, they just lost to Tennessee. That's so Kentucky football. Oh, they were up 12 and then blew it in the fourth quarter. That's so Kentucky football. And I think what is so impressive about what Mark Stoops has done here in the last couple of years is really change that mindset for the fans and the players, and we're still waiting on that to change, I guess, on a national level, and that's fine with everyone involved, I think.
Right.
But just seeing it change here in Lexington, I think, is a big deal, and I'm excited for another season of that. I mean, the team has had great success the last 2 years. This year, we're getting the starting quarterback back. He suffered a sorry, lost my train of thought for a second. Suffered a season-ending injury last season. We only saw him for 2 games, and then went to our backup for a couple of games. He got injured. Then we saw our running back or our wide receiver turn into a quarterback, and that was crazy. And Mark Stoops found a way to make it work and rework that offense as much as he could. But I'm excited for this year. We got a lot of returning starters back. We get the starting quarterback back, and I just hope we get a season. I hope we get to see it.
Hey, I love that, and I love everything you added to that conversation on Kentucky football. And like you said, Mark Stoops is a guy that's done a pretty good job there over the last couple of years.
And he does not get enough credit for it.
Exactly. And I was going to say, a lot of people around the country, you hear the name Stoops, you think Bob Stoops. And obviously Bob Stoops has earned that with Oklahoma and done such a great job in his career. But Mark Stoops is on the rise, and I think you make great points there with Kentucky football moving forward. So let's talk Kentucky hoops, though. Calipari, ever since he's been a coach, he's done great things. The New Jersey Nets, a little bit of a struggle, but with Memphis and with Kentucky, he's really been impressive. Sometimes people don't like him. Sometimes people love him. But you got to respect the guy. Anthony Davis, you mentioned, has come through Kentucky. There's been so many great athletes that have come through there. But these days, Kentucky hoops, sometimes gets overshadowed by a Duke, a Villanova, schools like that, Gonzaga. But obviously, Kentucky's still a big-time program, still doing big things every year. What do you expect from them this season and moving forward?
We don't know what to expect yet this season because Kentucky is waiting on a big-time transfer. Olivier Sarr moving in from ACC's Wake Forest, which is surprising enough. He was considering going to the NBA, decided against that, transferred to Kentucky. We don't know yet if he's going to be immediately eligible, and our front court is looking a little small and a little inexperienced without him. I think if the Cats get him eligible immediately, then they're going to be Final Four contenders. And if not, it's going to be another one of those seasons like we've seen the last year or two, where it's they're doing well throughout the season. They look okay. A couple of losses you shouldn't have had, but you pull it together in time for the tournament because that's what John Calipari always does. He always gets those guys ready in March. And I think we would have seen that this year had we had an NCAA tournament. And I think that could be the case next year. Yes, definitely. And I think that was sort of the mindset, the team at the time as well was okay, this is our time. This is what's going to happen. Cal got him ready at the right time like he usually does. And so, I think a lot of it's going to come down to Olivier Sarr and whether or not he gets eligible.
Absolutely. And shout out to Catherine Poe Ison tuning in. I think one of your friends.
Hello.
Yeah, so we got a lot of great viewers here today. Again,
Good.
Maggie Davis has done such a great job, and we're going to wrap it up here with her in just a couple minutes. But let's get a couple more Kentucky-based questions in here. So a lot of us haven't been to Kentucky. A lot of people tuning in from either New Jersey, Ohio, California, really all around the country, but not necessarily your home state. So if we go there one day, which I think a lot of us want to do, where do we have to go? Where should we visit? What food should we eat? I know Kentucky has a great reputation, so talk to us about that reputation.
Yes. Well, I think Kentucky is one of those states that is beautiful all 4 seasons. So any time of the year is a good time to come to Kentucky. But most of all, I think if you come, you should come in October or April because that is when our Keeneland racetrack is open, obviously horse capital of the world, and then Churchill Downs in Louisville as well. But as a Lexington girl, I'm going to plug Keeneland here instead because I think it's the most beautiful horse track in the entire country. I mean, it's just awesome. And it's so much fun. It's so unique. You can't have an experience like that anywhere else. So yeah, first of all, April or October, those are the 2 months you should come. And we've got a lot of good food here. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I work for KSR. We've got our own sports bar, so I'll plug KS Bar and Grill. It's pretty good. But there's a lot of good stuff around here. And hit me up if you come. I'll give you some good restaurant recommendations.
Hey, absolutely. We definitely will. Listen, Maggie, that's all I have for you today. If you have anything else to add, please do it.
Oh, I'm all good. Thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun, Sam.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Great guest, and definitely want to have you on again sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know.
Stay safe out there. Thanks, Maggie. Have a great night.
Bye. You too.